Right. So today we're going to really do a deep dive
Okay.
into crane safety, specifically looking at
Right.
signal person qualifications.
Okay.
We've got a whole bunch of OSHA regulations here, and we're
Yeah.
going to try and really break this down.
Awesome. Love it.
So when we're looking at, the signal person,
Right.
why is this so important? What's the big deal? Why does OSHA even care so much about this?
Yeah. I mean, the big thing to think about is the signal person is really the eyes for the operator.
Right.
And often the operator has a very limited view.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're relying on that person to communicate and make sure that everything is done safely. And it's that communication link between what's going on the ground and the crane.
And when we're talking about, the weights and the forces that are involved with cranes.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if something goes wrong, it could be catastrophic.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into it. So OSHA provides two options for qualifying a signal person.
Yes.
And that seems kind of interesting right off the bat.
It is.
Why would they give two separate options?
Yeah. So it gives a little bit of flexibility. Recognizing that different work environments may require different approaches.
Okay.
So you've got the option to use a third-party qualified evaluator, and that would be someone who would come in and really just vet the skills of that signal person.
Okay.
And the great thing about that is that it is portable.
Okay.
If you're a crane operator and you're working on different projects or a safety professional overseeing multiple sites, having that third-party stamp of approval can be very valuable.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's like a universal language then,
exactly.
No matter where you go.
Yeah.
So that's the first option. What about the second option?
So the second option is an evaluation by a qualified evaluator designated by the employer.
Okay.
So this is going to be someone
from within the company.
Okay.
Could be someone from the safety department. It could be someone who really just has a good grasp on crane operations and safety.
Okay.
The difference here is that this qualification is specific to that employer.
Oh, all right.
And so
it's not portable.
It is not portable.
Okay.
So it might be great, if you're working for a larger company. You've got dedicated safety teams. You've got employees who are there for the long term.
Yeah, it makes sense in those situations.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these two different paths.
Yes.
Let's just say we're going to pick a path.
Okay.
What does it actually take? What do you really need to know to be a qualified signal person? What's OSHA really looking for here?
OSHA gets very specific in their requirements.
Okay.
So it's not just about, kind of waving your arms around.
Yeah, there's got to be more to it, absolutely, than just, basic signals.
Yes.
So what are we talking about here? Yeah, so you're going to have a deep understanding of the signaling system that you're using, whether that's hand signals or voice commands or even a combination of the two.
Okay.
You're going to have to be able to apply those signals in real-world scenarios.
Right, because it's not just like a classroom.
Absolutely.
Right, it's a dynamic environment.
Absolutely.
And things are changing all the time.
It's constantly changing.
And there are things that, you can't anticipate.
Can't anticipate.
Necessarily in training.
Right, right.
So, so those are some things. What else are we looking at here?
A big one is understanding the crane's operations and limitations.
Okay, so like how much weight it can pick up.
Absolutely.
All that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Things like boom deflection, how that impacts the load.
I wouldn't have thought about that.
It can significantly impact the stability of the crane.
Interesting.
So they need to understand that. And then, of course, the different maneuvers, how they affect the load's movement. So you're not just relaying instructions, you're really understanding the physics of the crane.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that either.
And you're also anticipating potential issues that could arise.
Yeah, because it's not just about giving a signal.
Right.
You're
part of that team.
Part of the operation.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so those are really good points. So it sounds like it's not just a theoretical knowledge.
No.
You actually have to understand the application of the signals
and
what that means in real-world scenarios.
Absolutely.
So how do they test that? How do they know if you can actually do that?
So OSHA requires both written or oral exams as well as a practical exam.
Oh.
So the written and oral exam are going to test the candidate's knowledge and understanding of the rules. And then the practical exam is going to evaluate their ability to perform those signals in a simulated real-world environment.
So it's kind of like when you get your driver's license.
Exactly.
You have to do the written test, but then you have to also prove.
Yeah, you got to get in the car.
That you can drive.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got a qualified signal person.
Great.
They've done all the tests.
Yep.
They've passed everything.
Yep.
What's next? What does OSHA say about what happens next?
So next comes the documentation.
Okay.
Employers are required to maintain documentation proving that that signal person is qualified.
Okay, regardless of which path they chose.
Regardless of which path they chose.
Interesting.
And that documentation needs to be readily available at the site where that signal person is working.
Okay, so not at like the corporate headquarters?
Not at the corporate headquarters.
Like it actually needs to be at the site.
At the site.
Yeah. So like if an OSHA inspector shows up.
Exactly.
They could say, hey, show me the documentation for your signal person.
Absolutely. Or if a coworker even had concerns, they could request that.
That's interesting. So it's really about transparency.
Transparency and accountability.
And just making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Everyone's on the same page.
Okay, so we've got our signal person. They're qualified. We've got the documentation.
Yes.
What happens, let's say, down the road?
Yeah.
Their performance starts to slip.
Yeah.
Or they seem to be forgetting signals.
Yeah. What happens then?
What happens then?
So in that situation, the employer cannot allow that person to continue working.
Oh, wow.
As a signal person.
Okay.
And until they receive retraining.
Oh, okay.
And are reassessed.
Okay.
To confirm that they meet those qualifications.
Just a one-time thing?
It's not a one and done.
It's ongoing.
It is ongoing.
Okay, interesting.
Think of it like a pilot needing recurrent training
to
maintain their license.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Skills can deteriorate over time.
Yeah.
New technologies emerge.
Right.
And complacency can set in.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So it's really important that, even after they're qualified, they're maintaining those qualifications.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we covered a pretty good baseline here.
Yeah, I think so.
Of signal person qualifications.
Absolutely.
Why don't we take a quick break?
Okay.
And we'll come back and we'll discuss some more of the nuances of all of this.
I'm ready.
And for those of you listening, we'll be right back after a word from Safety One Source. Welcome back. We were talking about signal person qualifications, and it made me think that there are all these different ways to signal, right?
Right.
Hand signals, voice commands, radios.
Yeah. Does the same qualification apply to all those different methods?
It's a great question. And, you can't just assume that
someone who is really good at using hand signals is going to be automatically proficient at using a radio.
Yeah.
Each method has its own unique challenges that demand very specific knowledge and expertise.
So let's say we're talking about radios.
Okay.
What are some of the challenges that are specific to radio communication?
Yeah. So, think about it. You're on a busy construction site. Yeah. There are tons of crews.
Right.
Everyone's using radios. There's a huge potential for interference. A qualified signal person needs to be able to understand radio etiquette.
Okay.
How to make transmissions that are clear and concise that can cut through that noise.
Yeah, because it's like a whole other language almost.
Absolutely.
It's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Absolutely.
So how does OSHA address that?
Right.
All those different types of signaling methods.
Yeah, so OSHA doesn't necessarily have separate regulations.
For each method.
Okay.
But their requirement for competency still applies.
Okay.
So the evaluator, whether it's third party or employer designated, needs to assess the signal person's ability to use that specific method safely and effectively.
Okay.
So, for example, for radio communication, they'd be looking for someone who understands the technical aspects, who can communicate clearly, who can coordinate seamlessly with the crane operator.
So they actually have to demonstrate that
Absolutely.
They can use a radio properly.
They do.
Okay, interesting.
It's not just about knowing the signals, it's about mastering that method of communication.
That makes sense, yeah. So let's talk about the evaluators for a minute.
Okay.
So we've got these folks who are determining if someone's competent.
Right.
What qualifies them to make that judgment? What does OSHA say about that?
So OSHA uses the terms independence
and
expertise.
The evaluator needs to have a deep understanding of crane operations. They need to understand safety regulations. They need to understand the specific signaling method that's being evaluated. Right. So they can't be someone who's going to cut corners.
Right, yep.
Or let personal relationships influence their judgment.
Okay.
And this ties into, we were talking about apprenticeship programs earlier.
Right.
And how they often meet the criteria for being a qualified evaluator.
Why is that?
So good apprenticeship programs, especially ones that are run jointly by labor and management, they have a vested interest in making sure that the people that they are training are qualified.
Right.
They have structured curricula. Right. They have experienced instructors. They have rigorous evaluation procedures.
So they're not just kind of winging it.
Exactly.
They have a whole system in place.
They have a system to make sure that training is effective.
And so from a signal person's perspective, if they go through a good apprenticeship program, that's going to set them up for success.
It will. It will. And it will provide them with the skills and the knowledge that they need to be safe and effective on the job.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about the qualifications and the different ways to get qualified and all of that.
Yeah.
But what about, once someone's qualified,
right?
What are some of the real world challenges that they might face out on a job site?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things is distractions.
Yeah, because a job site is loud.
It's a sensory overload. It's loud.
There's so much going on.
There's constant movement.
Yeah.
And there's often pressure
to
get the job done quickly.
Get it done, yeah.
It takes incredible focus for a signal person to be able to stay on task with all of that going on.
I mean, and it's not just the physical stuff, right?
It's like the mental pressure.
Absolutely.
All of that.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have miscommunication between the crews.
Yeah.
You could have a supervisor breathing down your neck.
Yeah.
Telling you to hurry up.
Right. We got to get this done.
Yeah, you could have fatigue setting in after a long day.
Right.
All those things can really impact a signal person's performance.
Yeah. And when we're talking about this kind of work,
right,
a lapse in performance can be really dangerous.
It can be catastrophic.
Yeah. So they really have to be on top of their game.
They do.
Mentally as well as physically.
They have to have that mental fortitude.
Yeah.
The ability to stay focused under pressure.
Right.
And they also need those communication skills to be able to assert themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If they see something that isn't safe.
They have to say something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a leadership role.
It is.
It's not just about doing what you're told.
Right. It's about really understanding.
It's about taking ownership.
The safety of the entire operation.
Of that safety.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's not something they can do in isolation.
No.
It really takes a team effort.
It takes
to make sure everything's happening safely.
Absolutely. You want to create a culture where everyone feels comfortable speaking up about safety concerns.
Yeah, that's huge.
Regardless of their role.
So we're talking about not just the signal person,
right,
but everybody.
Everybody on that job site needs to be invested in safety.
So all this is really interesting. We've covered a lot.
We have.
But I think there's some more to unpack here.
Yeah.
Why don't we take another quick break?
Okay.
And then we'll come back and we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
And for everyone listening, we'll be right back after a word from Safety One Source.
All right, welcome back to the show. We've been talking a lot about signal person qualifications.
And, all the regulations and the requirements. Mm-hmm. But it's important to remember why we're even talking about this.
Absolutely.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's all about safety.
Right.
It's about making sure that everybody goes home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's why this is so important.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's easy to get lost.
Yeah.
In the paperwork and the rules.
Absolutely.
But really, we're talking about people's lives.
It is about people.
Yeah, and their safety and well-being.
Absolutely.
And it's a huge responsibility.
It is.
So, we've talked about the initial qualifications.
Yeah.
But what about after someone's qualified?
Right.
How do they make sure they stay sharp?
Ongoing training and evaluation is critical.
Okay.
I mean, the construction industry is always changing.
Oh, yeah.
You've got new technologies, new types of cranes, new challenges all the time.
Yeah, and things can change really quickly.
Very quickly.
So you can't just rest on your laurels.
No, you can't.
Once you've gotten that initial qualification.
It's a continuous process.
Yeah, you have to keep learning.
You do.
Keep adapting.
Yeah, think of it like a professional athlete.
Okay.
They don't just rely on their talent.
Right.
They're constantly training and practicing.
Right. They have coaches.
Yeah, coaches.
They have mentors.
They do.
And they're always working.
Always improve their game.
So for signal persons, is there something similar?
Absolutely.
How does that work?
You know, having mentors,
Sure.
having experienced signal persons who can provide guidance, who can share insights, who can help them to learn from mistakes.
Right, because experience is invaluable.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. You can't get that from a book.
No, you can't.
It's something that you learn by doing.
And by seeing.
Yeah, and having those conversations
absolutely
with folks who have been there.
Yeah, you know, and it's also about fostering that culture of communication where everyone feels comfortable speaking up.
Yeah, not just the signal person.
Not just the signal person.
But everyone on the site.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, everyone's responsible.
Right.
Frankly.
Because if one person gets hurt,
yeah,
it impacts everyone.
It impacts everybody.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up today,
yeah,
I think it's important to reiterate that, you know, signal person qualifications, that they're not just a box to check. They're really an investment in the safety and the success of the entire project.
It's interesting to think about it that way.
Yeah.
It's not just about compliance.
No.
It's about really creating a positive work environment.
Absolutely.
Where everybody feels valued.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I think our listeners are going to learn a lot.
I hope so.
From this deep dive.
Me too.
And for everyone listening out there, stay safe.
Stay safe.
And keep learning.
Absolutely.
This episode has been presented by Safety One Source.